quick question, and all I want to do is stand up or sit down, depending yes or no. Yes, stand up, no, sit down. First one, stand up, those of which your firms have a ethical or what I call, top line from the top message, we have an ethical policy in the firm which says we're good guys. Stand up if you've got one. That's interesting. Okay, sit down, that's fine, so take a second. And if you could stand up, those of you which are regulated, please, by FSA or others. Okay, it's interesting. There are a few people with FSA regulation who don't have what I call a code of conduct, standard of ethics, policy or whatever, which in this day and age is quite unusual, given the wonders of, I suppose, what do you call it, corporate responsibility notices in reports and accounts. Ours runs to about 65 pages, completely impenetrable than all the rest of it. I'm about to put my glasses on, which isn't a sign of me getting more serious, it's just a sign of having to read from a script from time to time to remind myself. At one end of it, and it sort of comes back to the point around whether you've got a code of ethics or what the feel of the business is, my take is the Act changes very little with the one important exception which we've talked about around the corporate offence. Most firms consider themselves to be good guys. We don't bribe people. People try and bribe us, we don't bribe people. And the question, I think, in all of this is, okay, where's the risks? What do we need to think about? I think also, and taking the point, I think, from my learned friends to my left, there is an environment where the risk is not just about we need to think about the fact that we've got a new act. There's going to be some turf wars, the Economic Crime Agency. But yeah, there are going to be people looking for scalps, not necessarily in this room, maybe in another room somewhere else in the city. There's another of these conversations going on. But people are going to be looking to make sure that this act is enforced. And also, as we all are rammed home to us on a daily basis, this country is short of a bob or two, so a few quid in the regulatory box isn't necessarily a bad thing. So that's another thing I think to bear in mind in terms of the risk to us going forward. Having said that, most of the firms in front of me today, the risk to you in terms of bribery, I don't know how many of you actually deal with foreign public officials. I'll talk to us about us in a second. The place where we should be is in the sort of low to medium risk sector. There will be some firms in here that are different, and they're going to talk a little about risk assessment. Elizabeth spoke about gifts and entertainments, and a couple of thoughts from me here before I even kick off. At one end, if you've ever been out for a night out with John, it's a chastening experience, at least the next day, but it is relatively cheap. So in terms, if I was entertaining John, I know what I'd have to do. But in terms of the bill to the firm, it would be acceptable, I think. If I had to look at this slightly differently, and here's a problem that could land up on someone's desk, and you have to entertain a member of the Saudi royal family who's a highly important client, taking them for the same experience as I would take for John could be deemed to be quite a significant insult. Not least, it could well be in breach of their religion and things like that. So it's all about proportionality, this, and that, I think, is the key for all of us. And Bimal spoke around the sort of high level, very much with passion around what makes this work. But proportionality is somewhere in the middle of this as well. Old Mutual, I work for, it's an international financial services business, operate all over the world. Sometimes we operate in nice, safe, wonderful jurisdictions, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Norway, and sometimes we work in more difficult jurisdictions, Kenya, Zimbabwe, Nigeria, Angola. So somewhere along the line, we have to be able to take a line that takes us, protects our board in the UK, protects our firm, protects our reputation, but enables us to do business in those jurisdictions, which is complicated. So my first point around, what are we doing, what are we here for, is we need to think about what the risks for us. The whole thing needs to be proportionate, and I think the whole thing needs to make sense to the firm. Because if it doesn't make sense to the firm, it's not going to happen. We do business with agents and intermediaries, sometimes, as I said, in good countries, sometimes in bad. Transparency is central to all of this. So, as I was at a conference last year run by Kroll, when I was in the audience, rather than standing on the stage looking out at the audience. And one of the points made absolutely after the conference, and a speaker was approached by somebody who I don't know very well because he gets the same train as me, He's quite an unusual looking creature because he's one of these people who still wears a cloak, even in this day and age, and he carries a silver-topped cane, and he has his hair swept back. So if you've ever seen any picture of Jack the Ripper or Kircher, it is him. But I don't know what he does. But he went and spoke to a chap from Transparency International and spoke about his business, sort of off the record in the "a friend of mine has a problem" sort of way. And he was talking very much about, I suppose, what's the word, about not necessarily under the counter commissions, but commissions where there is not a contract or there's not a central reason, and this sometimes I think gets to the core of the Aon matter, around the, all right, say in this country we deal with an independent financial advisor. We have a contract, it's in a regulated environment, the client sees commission being paid or whatever, it's transparent. If I'm even in this jurisdiction, I'm paying money to somebody, I have no contract, the party at the other end doesn't know it occurs, and the rest of it, there's always a question about, is somebody going to come back to you and say, is that a legitimate transaction? And as an aside in that, when you get down to who pays for bribery, and there's always an assumption that the other firm pays for bribery, a really good point made to me in a separate conversation is you'll find that the bribery gets tagged back in the bill sent to you. So if you pay a bribe to somebody for a particular reason, you'll find it actually works back in the cost to you. It's not something that the firm bears. So all in all, bad thing. Bad for our ethics, bad for our firm, means that we make bad decisions. So all in all, it should be absolutely in line with what the firm's all about. Question is, and I think this is the next bit, if we think about the risks and we try and get very much down to the outliers in our business, because that's where the risks are. If we can get down to those, then we understand very much more about the procedures we've got to have in place, because as Bimal says, at one end you can have a very high-level policy saying, one page of this is what we're all about, but it's what happens at the coalface is going to make all the difference. Second point is also reinforcing a point made around it won't work if the leadership aren't on board for this. You know, I'll talk a little about how we've approached this issue, but you know, again, speaking to a friend of mine who's talking to all the boards in his firm, and there's 35, 40 of them in terms of firms around the globe. He's sitting in front of them, talking to them about anti-bribery, and thus far, until he got to one country, he'd had nods, yes, that's entirely in line with what we do, young man, and we're very pleased that you've come to talk to us, now go away and we can do some business. But one firm said, oh yeah, here's some things to put in front of you, and came up with 4 or 5 scenarios, which to a degree are relatively private, but I'll share one with you. And one is around an extortion, actually, rather than a request for a bribe, an extortion along the lines of there is a local fine being levied against the firm or one of its employees, and if you don't pay us this money, your employee will be found guilty, no matter what the evidence is. And these are the challenges you will face if you have to manage certain things in certain jurisdictions. And the question is, do you lift up your corporate skirts and say it's our job to protect the member of staff, or do you say, no, we couldn't possibly pay this in that thing? These are complicated moral issues, and to a degree, if somebody is putting a gun to the corporate's head, my take is that the SFO or your regulators would look at this relatively kindly, depending on your original offence, relatively kindly, as long as it's transparent and it's documented and lessons are taken back into the centre of the firm. So, you know, there are going to be people, and Bimal and myself, these are things that are going to land on the desk for us to be able to answer.